There have always been questions surrounding the separation of England and the American colonies. Today, through first-hand accounts, we're going to explore what incidents occurred that led to the American Revolution. Welcome to another edition of Our American Story with Ginther and Fair. The year is 1763 in the American colonies, and there have been some increasing tensions over laws that King George III has been putting in place, such as the Proclamation of 1763.
Yeah, give me the colonist. Look, whoa, slow down. I don't care if it's deer season or not. You're not going past the Appalachian Mountains. What's that? You need a proclamation? Fine. Proclamation of 1763.
Ha! Well, I don't quite understand why we colonists can't hunt in the Ohio River Valley, but if it helps ease the tensions between us and the Native Americans, I guess King George knows what he's doing.
There were more acts to follow. In 1764, the Currency Act caused inflation in the colonies, while the Sugar Act cracked down on the molasses smuggling. And then, in 1765, King George III instituted something called the Quartering Act.
You know, it's not ideal. I mean, we only have so much room. Well, we have to feed them, and, well, I guess they're here for our protection, so we need to do our part.
The crown needed revenue, money, because the French and Indian War drained the government's coffers, so they attempted to raise the needed money through taxing things like tea and glass and paint.
It seems like every time we turn around, King George has put another tax or a duty on us, but if we have to chip in, I guess that's what we have to do for the betterment of the country.
And then came a fateful day, a day that would change the colonies forever. March the 5th, 1770. Some men rioted in Boston. Some were shot down by British soldiers.
Well, I think the term riot is a little strong. I mean, sure, there were colonists that were out venting their frustration or grievances over the British occupation, but I don't think any of them deserved a death sentence.
Did they deserve to die? Well, let's just say it was a horrible accident, and one that could have been prevented, well, if it wasn't for the actions of some of those colonists.
The divide between the colonists became even wider with the implementation of the Tea Act.
Oh yeah, I remember the Tea Act well. This is where I came to the realization that no matter what the Crown did, those patriots, they were going to complain. You see, the British East India Tea Company was faltering, and it looked like it was going to go out of business altogether, and the government was forced to step in. Now, the way I see it, the government has a responsibility to its citizens. You know, not only to keep them safe and such, but to also maintain the economic health of the country. Anyway, all King George III did was to require the colonists to drink tea from the British East India Tea Company, at a discounted price, mind you. And the colonists, well, they still complained.
I mean, look, I understand that the government has certain responsibilities to its citizens, but I think taking away our right to choose what kind of tea to drink is going more than a little too far. This is where I really started to see the tyranny of this crown. Evidently, I wasn't the only one. A bunch of people known as the Sons of Liberty, they boarded a boat and threw a bunch of tea overboard in protest. Kind of a boycott of sorts.
The Boston Tea Party, what were those agitators thinking? I mean, did the king actually reverse the Tea Act? No. The only thing they accomplished was, well, to get us all punished.
And to punish the colonists, King George III did. In 1774, he issued something called the Coercive Axe that closed Boston Harbor, took away Massachusetts' ability to rule itself, and required soldiers to be tried in England, and strengthened the Quartering Act. These acts were designed to divide the colonies, but they seem to have the opposite effect.
Yes, the Coercive Acts were designed to turn the colonies against each other. However, it actually brought us all together, and we formed the First Continental Congress. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not like we're all one big happy family already, but at least we're starting to work together for the betterment of the country.
Relations only worsened in April of 1775 when a British patrol was sent to Concord to find weapons and powder.
This is a day the British will soon not forget. I mean, when they first arrived at Lexington, the local militia had turned out to block their way. Now, you have to understand that this was nothing new. You know, most of the time there'd be a short standoff and the militia would disperse and the soldiers would just kind of continue on their way. No one wanted to cause an escalation in tensions. But this was different. The militia didn't stand aside. And eventually a gun went off. No one knows whose gun. But after that, the British soldiers opened fire and the militia ran.
Shot in Lexington? How could I forget? After all, it is called the shot heard around the world. It's the first shot in a revolution that would bring democracy not only to America, but really all around the world.
But that wasn't the only fighting the British would see that day. By the time the British had gotten to Concord, the local militia had fled and were hiding in the nearby hills. In their search for guns and powder, the British soldiers were bringing things out of houses and burning them in the streets.
I heard the stories about the Concord militia, how they watched this as the smoke billowed over the hills of Concord and how they were afraid that the British were burning the whole town down. And they really needed to do something. So they charged out of the hills, met some of the British soldiers at the North Bridge, that's what I've been told, and this is where the shooting began. The British had a pretty poor defensive position and soon began their retreat back to Boston.
Oh, yeah, I heard about the British attempts to return to Boston peacefully. Those 700 soldiers, they were harassed every one of those 20 miles. About 2,000 colonial militia came from everywhere. They were hiding behind trees and rocks just to ambush those soldiers, and then they'd run away. By the time the British arrived back in Boston, 79 of the brave Kingsmen were killed.
When news of the conflict at Lexington and Concord reached King George III, he regarded the actions as an open rebellion and the colonists who took part as traitors.
This is an open rebellion. Those men are traitors.
The colonists, in an attempt to rectify the situation, met again.
The rebels got together in, I think it was Philadelphia.
Well, not much actually came out of the Second Continental Congress, except they did decide to organize what became known as the Continental Army. You see, up until that point, there was just several militias from around the colonies, and so what needed to be done was to bring those militias together into one army, and it was called the Continental Army. Oh, and by the way, they chose George Washington to be its leader. Pretty good choice.
Ooh, I'm so scared. Ooh.
Even with the Second Continental Congress, the bloodshed continued. In June of 1775, in an attempt to liberate Boston from the siege the British Army and Navy placed upon it, the Patriots attempted to take Bunker Hill.
Well, I think you mean Breed's Hill. You see, there was some confusion on the map, and a lot of the names were on the hills were mismarked. Anyway, the battle actually took place at Breed's Hill.
Oh, I remember this incident. The rebels were dug in on top of the hill, so the British fired a couple of shells at them, just from their ships to scare them off, but they wouldn't move. So General Gage sent his men up, and he ran the rebels off. He just won the skirmish.
Well, I do remember it being a little bit more than a skirmish. You see, General Warren and his men endured an entire night of shelling and nothing more than crude dugouts that they built. The Patriots were short on ammunition, and so when the British approached, Colonel Prescott told his men, "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes." The colonel wanted to make sure that every shot counted, and it worked, at least the first 2 times the British tried to take the hill. The brave Patriots ended up retreating and turning the hill over to the British, losing General Warren in the process.
Chalk one up for the good guys.
Boston did end up getting liberated the following year in March of 1776, when Henry Knox, Benedict Arnold, and Ethan Allen captured 59 cannons from Fort Ticonderoga and managed to place the cannons on top of Dorchester Heights.
That was a great day. The British loaded up their soldiers and some loyalists and sailed to Nova Scotia. See you later.
Wait now, what? Guns on Dorchester Heights? You mean the British are leaving? I gotta go.
Wait, where do you go? I got more questions. What's going on?